can we know what the crown jewel is without knowing what the crown jewel is? Weird question, right? But in this case, the answer is yes. What if I told you the crown jewel already featured in One Piece since even before the time skip? In fact, multiple times. Now, that said, we have never seen it before, only have we ever heard about it. So without further ado, sub to the channel to help us solve more One Piece mysteries, and let's get into this. The pirate crown jewel was alluded to have been taken from Hachinosu and brought to God Valley. The retrieval of the pirate crown jewel happens to occur right as the God Valley Hunger Games is about to take place, meaning two seemingly unrelated events coincided to result in the God Valley incident. I say seemingly because I doubt very much it's a coincidence, but I'll cover that towards the end, so make sure to stick around till then. There's potentially much deeper connections to this pirate crown jewel from the flashbacks we see throughout the story. Carmel talked about retiring after one final score to Cypher Pole. Xebec was previously said to go to God Valley for one big score also. But let's jump straight into the treasure itself. The crown jewel is most likely John's treasure. John actually states this explicitly in the panel which depicts the Rocks crew in 1096. It could be that Roger inadvertently took the Celestial Dragon's crown jewel, the descendant of the Celestial Dragon champion Garling, Shanks, after the pirate crown jewel was switched with the baby Shanks. We saw Shanks as a baby in a treasure chest taken by the Roger crew, much to their own surprise, during Volume 4 Billion. This reflects the chest we saw with Gaimon as well, with one literally containing Gaimon himself. When you think about why someone would put a baby into a treasure chest, there is only one real, reasonable theory that would explain it. Shanks was put there to be hidden. Oda is not going to have a baby Shanks put in there as some dark form of revenge, or because that's an appropriate way to transport a child. Shanks was put in there to survive, and in doing so I think it's fair to assume this is when the crown jewel was displaced from wherever it was originally kept. Makes sense that you'd hide a baby in the most protected or hidden place on an island, which is no doubt where you'd hide something like the pirate's crown jewel also. So it's not much of a reach to think the two were switched. John's treasure has yet to be discovered, and it's possible the fact that John had it but went unnoticed is because it may not have been found where it was originally kept, as would be the case if Shanks had been swapped with it. Instead, if anyone saw Roger take the chest that had Shanks inside, they may have mistaken it for the pirate crown jewel for the same reason, making Roger the target of the world government and leaving John to get away with the treasure undetected. Well, potentially up until his crew discovered its true nature and disposed of him. When Luffy notices Captain John's treasure finder, which leads to his hidden treasure, he snatches it up immediately saying, "I'm keeping it." This could mean that the reincarnation of Joy Boy and future Pirate King instinctively and without thinking took the treasure finder that takes him directly to the pirate's crown jewel. On the other hand, however, Nami allows Luffy to take the armband because there's no gems on it, making her think it has no value. Also, Usopp replies, "I wouldn't take that if I were you," and he starts to shiver. I haven't got much to say about this Usopp line, but we all know that Usopp lines have always been a little bit sus. Luffy goes on to trade the treasure finder with Buggy, in exchange for Buggy showing him the way out of Impel Down to freedom, which is a parallel to what the treasure finder does. This will come into play later. The treasure was said to be hidden under a Skull Island. What is spicy about this is that we know the crown jewel was at Hachinosu, a Skull Island. Similarly to Maryjois with the Straw Hat, the treasure may have been kept underground, reminiscent of the description of John's treasure. Now, the question is Buggy's information current, or is it outdated, since the crown jewel left Hachinosu? Knowing Oda, it'll probably work both ways around, meaning that the jewel is no longer at Hachinosu, but instead beneath a different Skull Island now. Now, we do have Onigashima. It was recently flying around Wano and being blasted with a load of holes, making it seem unlikely. However, what is interesting is if it is on Onigashima, it could give more context to why Kaido wanted to pick it up and plop it on the flower capital. Maybe he thought it would wake Pluton or tie to the Joy Boy prophecy somehow. Alternatively, it could have been returned to Hachinosu after the God Valley incident. Some additional information about Hachinosu that might come into play later is what we see with another so-called incident that happens here, the Rocky Port incident, which is where Kobe became the hero of the Marines by freeing prisoners there, much like we see during the God Valley flashback. It was also said to be around the time Blackbeard overthrew Ochku, another Rocks pirate who was at the God Valley incident. So Rocks pirates Xebec, Kaido, Ochku and Blackbeard have all sat on the throne at Hachinosu. Throughout this time, hanging around has been Higurashi, an extremely knowledgeable and potentially conniving character shown to manipulate the events of history, heavily mirroring Carmel. Kureha also fits the old hag or witch theme these two play, which leads me to my next point. But if you do want more on the connections between the three old hags, check out my previous videos on Kureha and also Big Mum. Okay, so this is where things get a lot bigger in scope and potentially tie into someone pulling strings to affect the events of the world. I mentioned Higurashi, Kureha and Carmel, all of whom have mysteriously deep knowledge about devil fruits, will and world secrets. So ask yourself, why did someone steal the pirate crown jewel? Garp specifically said it should be expected for pirates to chase after it, so it might be that it's been taken intentionally to draw the pirates to God Valley. Now, who would want to put the Marines, pirates and celestial dragons in one place? This is something I'll be covering in an upcoming video, but I guarantee not everything at God Valley is as it seems. Powers above even Garp may be at play. After all, the island is called God Valley, right? Now, if you've got any ideas as to what really was going on behind the scenes at God Valley, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments, and if they line up to what I'm saying or if they contrast what I'm saying, I'll try add them in that video. Whatever John's treasure is, it looks like it's the reason Xebec went to God Valley. It might be what Carmel wanted too, that one big score. Carmel specialized in child trafficking, so alternatively, Carmel's one big score could be Shanks, which would be the celestial crown jewel. What's interesting about this is the parallels to Marineford, as Whitebeard went there to essentially save a child, and there's a ton of parallels between the God Valley incident and Marineford. So we do have an older video on that though, so I won't touch too much on it now. Buggy seems set on getting this treasure also, tying him to the crown jewel. Funnily enough, we see an interesting tie between Carmel and Buggy when Buggy returns from looking for John's treasure and talks about a witch fattening up children before eating them. Oh, and by the way, the chapter just so happens to be called The Highest Powers of the World. Another nod to the God Valley incident there too. Back to what the pirate crown jewel actually is though. I believe the clue is in the name. Crowns represent royalty. Pirates' crowns represent pirate royalty. The only true pirate royalty we know is the Pirate King. And what do kings wear? Crowns. So, within the name you can see Oda being a master swordsmith, and it's possible that again he fools us readers by hiding the answer right under our noses. This would explain Buggy's interest in the treasure, as Oda could have Luffy discover Laugh-Tale and become the true Pirate King, but Buggy finds the Pirate King crown, making him a pseudo Pirate King. Funnily enough, as I was writing this script and closing it up, Buggy's new TCG card dropped, and look what just happens to be in the foreground, a crown. Right, well, if that isn't a sign from Goda, I don't know what it is. So on that note, I think I'm all done there. If you like that theory, make sure to drop a comment below, particularly if I've gone wrong in any places. Correct me, feel free. But otherwise, I'm going to jump straight into the next one. Now it's time to discuss the Garp and Xebec connection. Ever notice the crazy connections between the two? The next theory is probably the spiciest of the three and still leaves my head aching to this day. Did you know Oda mentioned Garp might have an alter ego in SBS 59? Garp's scar disappears no less than 25 times throughout the story. Mistake by Oda? Not a chance. So, do Garp and Xebec share some will or destiny in some strange way? Sounds crazy, but here's all the evidence we've found over the past year and some change. And if you decide for yourself what the connection is, please let us know in the comments. And of course, subscribe if you'd be so kind. Now, jumping straight into it, we have some very basic ties which I'll cover briefly before diving deeper. Unlike almost every other character in the series, Garp has two laughs, not one. Very suspicious, as we know laughs are distinct to every person in One Piece and expresses some part of their character. The only character with two laughs other than Garp is Mihawk. Additionally, we first see Garp with Morgans, a marine turned pirate, perhaps Oda cheekily reflecting Garp's transformation from pirate to marine. This is definitely a weird one, as we know the cover stories often foreshadow future events, and let's not forget Garp's face was initially hidden by a dog mask during this time. Furthermore, Garp was a pirate in Romance Dawn, and obviously Xebec is a pirate. You could argue Garp has a pirate nature as well as a member of Sword, which is effectively a marine that's free to do as they please, or as it's also called in the One Piece world, a pirate. In level 5 of Impel Down, we see this unfortunate Xebec looking dude who's completely frozen. Garp was just frozen at Hachinosu, meaning one was frozen on marine grounds and the other on pirate territory. If there is a connection between the two, I wonder if this is why Oda didn't include Blackbeard at the Battle of Hachinosu, but that's just food for thought. In the anime, Garp overheard Sabo, Ace, and Luffy boasting of their dreams to become pirates, leaving him infuriated. Garp then chases them out into the night, breaking down trees and rocks and beating them to a pulp. Sabo exclaimed he was a monster. Afterwards, he casually leaves them, saying he will not be so merciful next time, which all sounds like it would fit the description we got of Xebec from Sengoku. He also described the Rocks pirates as a crew that bred the next 3 Yonkos, so Xebec has great talent as an instructor, much like Garp the mentor. We often see his mouth wide open laughing, reminiscent of the shadows of Xebec we've seen. Now, the more I look at this one, the more it makes me think. Rock looks a lot like Dragon, going by the silhouette, and of course Dragon is related to Garp. According to 1096, Xebec's crew treats their captain very similar to the way the Straw Hats treat Luffy, sort of shouting and barking at him, which again is another member of the monkey family. It's a strange connection for sure, and it looks like we'll get a full Rock's face reveal pretty soon. I'm of course referring to the God Valley incident we're currently seeing in the manga, which leads us to one of the biggest connections between Garp and Rocks altogether. No one could stop Rocks in the Marines except for Monkey D. Garp. Why? Could he really be that powerful that Roger and his entire crew was not enough? And it's only through Garp's sacrifice that Kobe became the hero of the Marines, alluding to the idea that Xebec may have sacrificed himself for the greater good at God Valley, which was then credited to Garp as the hero. Okay, so this might sound like a reach to some people, but if you've looked into a lot of characters, you'll know certain attributes of theirs will line up with other characters to give us hints, particularly Zoro, Kuina, Toshigi, stuff like this. So it's interesting because with Garp, his height is given as 9'5", and Xebec was introduced in chapter 957 and episode 958. Seemingly intentional considering how similar, like how close that chapter and episode is apart. One small other detail is Xebec is the name of a ship with an outstretched bow, and pre-time skip a character explicitly points out, look at this ship's huge bow, when pointing at Garp's ship. So, what can all these ties mean? Why would Oda intentionally not draw Garp's scar in so many panels? Whatever you think the answer is, drop your predictions in the comments below. Either way though, it's looking like we'll find out soon. Kuba the Red Sea is a big proponent of the fact that Garp is Xebec, just like Adam Jimrikai thinks also. It's not something that I was keen to think about at first, but the more I've seen the connections, the harder it is to ignore. There's clearly a very, very intrinsic connection between the two, one that's probably not been foreshadowed explicitly in the story, or not that at least I could find, so I'm very interested to see how this one resolves. Now, before we finish, we have one more theory for you, and this one packs a lot of juice. Since the reveal of the special Buccaneer race, the community has been booming with theories about who might be related to whom. During the Egghead arc, we've been shown 3 distinct places during flashbacks. These are Ohara, God Valley, and the Sorbet Kingdom. What's interesting about this is Egghead is in the South Blue, and Ohara is in the West Blue. We're currently in the South Blue and heading to the West Blue. The Sorbet flashbacks were tied to the God Valley incident, which is also stated to be in the West Blue. So, is this foreshadowing or is it just coincidence? Well, it's most likely just the thematic progression, as we, the reader, and the Straw Hats are all going to the West Blue. The Ohara flashbacks highlighted some characters we haven't seen in a while, bringing their stories to the forefront and making them relevant again. We see this in the other flashbacks too, but there is one example some might have missed. Kong. He was only shown in a couple panels, but we discovered he played a major part in the Celestial Dragons going to God Valley. As I mentioned earlier though, this flashback was connected to Sorbet. So the question is Kong from Sorbet? It may seem arbitrary, like a silly question, but there's a reason why this is actually pretty important. His recent conversation with Garp was his second appearance in the story officially, and yet he sits in a position so high within the Marines that even Sengoku calls him Sir. From the conversation with Garp, we can gather that both Marines knew about what the Pirate Crown Jewel was, and Kong appears to be in charge of security, potentially security that were involved in taking the Pirate Crown Jewel. Like many characters we feature on this channel, there's not much to go off when we first look at Kong, particularly as he's only had 2 chapters so far to do his thing, as I say. But digging a little deeper, we can discover some secrets about the history of Kong, and maybe even some clues to what will happen with him relatively soon. Let's start by going over the basic connections, and I'll reveal the reason this will play an important role towards the end, so make sure to stick around for that. Here's some residents of the South Blue and Sorbet Kingdom. Kingdom. Notice any pattern? They all have longer chins with beards that resemble spikes pointing upwards. As you can see, there's plenty of examples of this, and it even fits my boy Frankie, who I believe to be connected to Sorbet. Check out the video for more on that though if you haven't seen it already. Anyway, Kong has the same style going on here, and his build matches a lot of candidates for buccaneers. He also has a tattoo on his arm like many of the others. The tattoo might be a nod to the green blood band worn by the seraphim in their arms. In one of the only panels we have of him, we see this interesting symbol in the manga only, which resembles a similar symbol to the one that can be found on the church at Sorbet. This church and KUMA's backstory ties as buccaneers to the Nika family. The Nika fruit is heavily tied to the number 56, as we know. Interestingly, Kong has ties to the number 59, primarily through his birthday being May the 9th, 59, and his debut chapter being 594. Kong then reappeared in 1096, just one chapter off 1095, which would have given us another 59. This was also 502 chapters after his first appearance, which is only just a tiny bit over 500. Considering Oda's affinity for number play, I imagine these were intended to line up at some point in some way, but instead got scrapped to give something else priority. Or maybe I'm just not smart enough to figure out what Oda's done with it there. But if you understand it, then please let me know in the comments. One possibility though is it is an inversion of Garp, who is also tied to the number 56. The fact his name is Kong does suggest some monkey vibes going on. As I say though, you let me know what you think about that. Kong has two main characters he's tied to from his brief appearance so far, Sengoku and Garp. Sengoku and Garp notably joined the Marines the same year alongside Suru. These are the only four people in the Navy whose hair is grey, notifying their age or maybe suggesting their generation. I bring this up because Garp is from the East Blue, Suru from the North Blue, and Sengoku from the South Blue, leaving one more sea, the West Blue. The reason why this is interesting is because Kong being tied to Sorbet in the South and also in the West Blue through God Valley would fit well alongside what we've seen already, by which I mean the flashbacks involving both, as I say, Sorbet and God Valley, and again with Egghead and O'Hara. Okay, so there's enough connections there to raise an eyebrow, but if this was the case, then why would it even matter? Well, and Garp are the only two characters to be born on May the 9th. Both are seemingly from the South Blue. Sengoku is strangely absent, as I said, from the O'Hara incident and the God Valley incident, suggesting there's more we've yet to find out about Sengoku's backstory. I believe this backstory could be coming soon, alongside Kong's. In fact, maybe even sooner than we thought, considering, as I say, we are going to the West Blue, and Sengoku must have some sort of tie to the West Blue, hence his absence. The fact that we're heading from the South Blue to the West Blue may mean even that Sengoku versus Kong is happening. A little extra speculation I think might tie into this is the retrieval of Garp, with which Suru could come back into the story also. We know Garp, Sengoku and Suru all joined the Marines the same year, and they all seem to have ties to Kong except for Suru. There's a lot more to this theory to be unpacked, so consider this just a taster before we drop a bigger video on the topic and get into thoughts about stuff like Jozu being Kong's son. Jozu was born in the West Blue after all. Anyways, thanks for sticking through all three theories, and make sure to comment which one was your favourite. Shout outs to the whole TLA crew and anybody who worked on this. We've got a lot more coming, particularly with the Sorbet Kingdom and other residents. People like Big Mum, as I say, Jozu. I'm sure you've heard about Whitebeard. Mr. Bushido will be added a bit to that. As I say, the TLA group will be Haagen-Dazs, blah blah blah, the whole crew, Elson. If you have made it this far, you've just won 3 Galaxy Impacts. Let me know where you want them dropped in the comments. Love life, be nice to animals, and I'm gone. 1092 has got every One Piece fan asking where is KUMA going, and why did he hit the red line? It's actually pretty easy to understand when it's put into context. However, the bigger question could be, how will all of this tie up? Will KUMA actually die? And if so, how will KUMA's will be continued? KUMA's fruit has grown more and more important as time goes on, with us first thinking his pawpaw fruit could displace objects and people, just to later find out it can do much, much more. Such an ability may have been integral to the story of Joy Boy, the Poneglyphs and the Void Sentry, and it feels like we'll soon get an info dump on the history of KUMA's fruit. If you don't know a One Piece YouTuber called Tosmorn already, check him out, links below. He spoke to me about how KUMA's fruit may have been what actually imbued the poneglyphs to begin with, and this is how they get the voices inside. An interesting idea for sure, and plenty more options there to explore, but moving on. From 1068 to 1092, KUMA uses his power to flee Kamabaka Kingdom, where he travels through the air before crashing into the Red Line. There were no paw prints when KUMA landed, which is usually a sign of KUMA using his fruit. This suggests to us KUMA did not intend on being at the Red Port, so why would KUMA throw himself into the wall? Did he really forget about the Red Line's existence and just crash into it? This video will explain how it's actually quite simple, but the reasons could unravel something far deeper. So like and sub, and let's get straight into this one. When we first saw KUMA crash into the Red Line, it immediately stood out as strange to many fans. On reread, however, I noticed when Lucci commanded S-Bear to land on Egghead Island by flying using his fruit, it appears KUMA received the same command. This is potentially what caused him to suddenly get up and run off, despite Dragon's orders to stay put. Once triggered, KUMA uses his pawpaw fruit to fly to Egghead Island, but seeing as Kamabaka Kingdom is in Paradise, which is on the other side of the Red Line to Egghead, KUMA was instead intercepted by the Red Line. As I mentioned, when KUMA crashes into the Red Line, it doesn't leave a paw mark, and neither is there one when he hits the ground. This shows it was not the intended landing place, as usually when KUMA does use his pawpaw fruit for this kind of travel, it leaves a large signature paw print in the landing spot, whether or not that's in the ground or whatever. From the Red Port, KUMA makes his way up the Red Line from where he landed, again suggesting he did not intend on being at the Red Port to begin with, and so the world government tries to stop him. Atop the Red Line, KUMA meets a Kainu where he narrowly avoids a lethal one-shot to the face. KUMA slips past a Kainu and uses his fruit to continue his journey, but not before a Kainu can land another attack on KUMA's leg. With KUMA severely injured, he disappears, and Akainu wonders where KUMA could have gone, highlighting the fact that the world government is currently unaware of the connection between the Seraphim and their original hosts. When we look at the sequencing, the revolutionaries in 1067 say, "Is he still under control of the government?" Which is a hint. In the following chapter, we see Oda has both S-Bear and KUMA use their paw abilities to travel at the exact same time. We see Lucci saying, "We will go to Egghead using S-Bear's power," and the next few panels are KUMA pawing himself from Kamabaka. Also, in the same chapter, Vegapunk mentions the robot climbing the Red Line, which KUMA does not long after. Next time we see Cypherpole there on Egghead. This sequence reads quite explicitly when you look at it from this perspective, with it seemingly pretty obvious Lucci's command to breach Egghead somehow triggered KUMA. So why is KUMA currently mindless to begin with? And how is it possible KUMA is connected to S-Bear on this deeper level? KUMA having no will is probably due to his mind being manipulated by Vegapunk and the world government, likely within the past decade. We see this reiterated in Akainu's 1092 flashback, where he tells Bonnie her father willingly chose to go undercover, which will be what leads to KUMA literally losing his mind, or will. Another clue KUMA was physically experimented on is that we see he has bear ears. This is because on closer inspection it is revealed KUMA did not in fact have these bear ears as a child or in Bonnie's flashbacks when he is an adult. So at some point later in KUMA's life he developed a new physique, potentially during the time he was being experimented on. The bear ears are most likely indicative of the fruit he has, so it's probably involved. Included in this new physique is KUMA's eyes, which now appear the same blank white as S-Bear's. So we can see this isn't exactly KUMA as himself, but instead a cyborg shell, perhaps with a fragment of KUMA left inside. We don't know why KUMA went through these experiments, but it's implied he chose to willingly. The name Bartholomew may be a hint to this, as it likely comes from one of Jesus' apostles who goes by the same name, and who became popularized through the miracles he performed. However, Bartholomew is best known through dying for a cause greater than himself. KUMA holding a Bible throughout the story also suggests this, which is interesting while being deeply connected to a seraphim, considering the word seraphim originates from the Bible and is a type of angel. This is again echoed in the Lunarian traits and appearance surrounding the seraphim too. But anyway, it's possible KUMA has absolutely no will at this point and is a zombie, as Akainu suggested. In fact, Akainu specifically said KUMA doesn't have a mind of his own, which is a hint his mind is possessed by someone or something else. If KUMA has no will, he may not have the autonomy to get around objects in his path, whereas in the past he may have had this capability. In other words, KUMA probably could have dodged the red line if he was in his right mind, but because he's like a zombie, boom, he just followed the order and went straight into it. It's likely KUMA can only send other objects or people in straight lines though, as suggested by the time skip where the Straw Hats were sent to islands that all appear on one side of the red line, including Paradise, the East Blue, South Blue, and finally the moving island of Woodvaria in the sky. If this is true, then it may suggest that the poneglyphs were partially blocked by the red line, which could be why we find 2 at Fishman Island. That said, it's just speculation for now, and I'll discuss it more in a future video about Frankie and KUMA's connections and how it might sound wild, but it's looking like Frankie might actually get KUMA's fruit. But how is KUMA having no will relevant to his connection with Esper? If Esper and KUMA are connected, then having no will may mean the original KUMA is susceptible to the same control as Esper, for example through the authority chip, which I'll touch on in a second. Evidence to suggest KUMA and Esper share a deeper connection than initially thought can be seen via Frankie, who noticed something important about the Seraphim. Frankie, rather than Vegapunk, identified S-Snake's affection for Luffy resembling the original host, Boa. It's worth noting Frankie has moments like this several times in Egghead, suggesting his intellectual instinct is more advanced than Vegapunk's in some ways. Vegapunk follows up by stating it must be a feature of Lineage Factor. This line also gives us a clue that the connection between KUMA and Esper is also to do with Lineage Factor. We've already seen S-Snake help the Straw Hats by unpetrifying them, so maybe we'll see Esper and even some of the other Seraphim turncoat. So, will the Pacifistas also be affected by the connection between KUMA and Esper, as they also share KUMA's lineage factor partly? The short answer is no, as they are clones of KUMA's body, unlike the Seraphim, which are duplicates in both body and mind, and even fruit in Esper's case. One possibility is Bonnie will give Esper KUMA's memories after his death. Seeing as they seem bound currently, this would essentially act as reviving KUMA once the memories are restored. The fact KUMA's memories were even left in that bubble in Egghead is sus to begin with, so it's possible KUMA planned his own revival. Something interesting about this idea is that KUMA is said to be a special race, and Esper of course has Lunarian lineage, so maybe KUMA is tied to the Lunarians. KUMA does sound like Luna after all, but for now let's get back to the point before I start going off on one. So this leaves us with the question, if KUMA is connected to Esper to the point where he even carries out some of the orders that Esper receives, then how is this actually happening? It's not like KUMA could hear Lucci give the order to Esper. Or could he? What if, when Lucci gave the order to Esper, KUMA did actually hear it somehow? A mindless KUMA hears the order to Esper to breach Egghead Island and automatically carries it out. This idea was something Dax Sake pointed out to me, and he suggested that KUMA had literally just been at Maryjois, which is where Lucci just was. So there is another possibility which could be more likely. Dax's idea was that, as I said, Lucci was in Maryjois with KUMA and everyone else before this happened, and probably has a level of control over KUMA, like he does over Esper, since he protects the Celestial Dragons. It may be that KUMA has an earpiece or some internal transmitter that lets him hear what Lucci's saying. It makes sense that a slave's handler would have a way to control the slave. As Dak put it, "Hey KUMA, go get me a soda." A really spicy addition to this is that it was actually stated Seraphim cannot take orders via Denden Mushi, but we know KUMA is not a Seraphim, meaning this could be a brilliant reversal of the Denden Mushi nuance here. Another solution involves the authority chip. We haven't seen a transmission connecting any of the other Seraphim to their hosts so far, but maybe somehow the authority chip's command to Esper reached KUMA. We've had some pretty detailed descriptions of how the hierarchy of authority works while using the chip. We've also seen it tested, for example when Kaku gave orders to Esper using the chip, but Sentomaru could override them. Also, Shaka couldn't stop Esper from attacking Lucci and Kaku, which might imply Vegapunk no longer has the same control as he did before. But before I conclude, let me just throw some extra info your way and see if anything sticks, and then I'll tie it all up with what I thought happened with the authority chip. I can't put my finger on it yet, but there is one other thing that stands out to me. For some reason I feel like the green blood ties into all of this, and potentially even KUMA's special race or people, depending on the translation you go by. Maybe Esper and KUMA are somehow telepathically connected through their genetics, or Lunarians are somehow special in a way. One detail that's barely discussed by the community is the fashion piece on the Seraphim. S-Snake has earrings, and Esper has the clothes pattern we see with KUMA and Law and some others. Strangest of all is probably that S-Croc has the scar across his face that Crocodile has for some reason. None of these characters should have this, it would seem. So is it a stylistic choice perhaps to make the Seraphim easier to distinguish, or is this another nod to a strange connection in their lineage factor? There is one notable exception I thought I'd mention for the Mihawk fans though, which is that S-Hawk does not wield an exact copy of Yoru. This is super significant in my opinion. As I've stated in older videos, Yoru was probably Joy Boy's blade, hence why you get the title World's Strongest Swordsman. But you can catch more of that in some of my older stuff. Let me know your thoughts on these additional bits of information in the comments section below, and I'll get back to you on it ASAP. Now, in conclusion, what is most likely going on with the connection between KUMA and Esper? And does this mean we should expect some of the other Seraphim to go through a similar situation? Firstly, there most likely is a connection between the two. The connection is very likely why Oda has kept Esper separate from the other Seraphim so far, as it would otherwise complicate the whole situation involving authority. I think Lucci commanded KUMA from a long distance to land on Egghead using his Paw Fruit inadvertently. The authority chip allowed Lucci to command Esper, and Esper's connection to KUMA through their shared lineage factor meant that KUMA also received the command. Particularly if KUMA at some point had command over the Pacifista or the other Seraphim. Remember, Esper is a clone of KUMA. This is alongside the fact that KUMA has no will of his own and so was submissive to the order, meaning the other Seraphim would likely not affect their hosts in the same way, as they all have fairly strong wills. Following the order Lucci gave, KUMA uses his fruit to go to Egghead, causing him to hit the red line blocking his path. He then immediately climbs over the red line rather than using his fruit to go up it, like a robot meeting an obstacle. On his first opportunity, KUMA uses his fruit again after reaching the top and disappears. He'll probably arrive at Egghead, get closure with Bonnie, and then get the tissues ready for that one, because we all know he's probably gonna die. It should be coming soon anyway, so stay tuned and I'll drop an update with Frankie getting KUMA's fruit pretty soon. If you made it this far, you just want any hat you want from the whole One Piece world. Let me know which one you're going for in the comments, like and sub for more, and I'll definitely catch you on the next one. Muchos lavos, and peace. Welcome back guys. Today we're hoping to solve what the deal is with Emu and the Mother Flame, and where Oda is taking the story. We're going to be doing this looking at a very big clue we got recently, which is the fact Emu uses the Mother Flame close to Maryjois. It's just been revealed that York has created a weapon of mass destruction. In a conversation with Brago a few weeks back, he highlighted to me that the translation was not quite accurate when Emu initially said Vegapunk made the Mother Flame. Instead, it was meant to come across more like Emu was wondering about Vegapunk's involvement, indicating she didn't know who specifically made the weapon. So let's quickly look at what Brago's got to say about the whole Mother Flame situation before I go on to trying to solve all this.
The Mother Flame and the impact of it has been altered or changed, especially based on the information that's come out. Important, right? Because it was Vegapunk's magnum opus for the most part.
As it does feature ice anyway, the traditional myth. I think it will take place with the giants coming out of ice instead. We've seen ores frozen. Ringo in the Land of Ice is pretty mysterious. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. Talking about ice, there's another video coming out which in a couple days, which is with Randy Troy talking about KUZAN and Garp and their future. So make sure to like them so far. I've seen no frowning. At TLA, we have a stream soon with Chestnut and Hime, a huge Ask the Audience game show known as the Great Davy Backfight, and of course some theory videos dropping pretty much every Friday. So see you soon and peace. Today, we're solving a recent and important One Piece mystery involving green blood that I bet you didn't even know existed. I'll cover the theory in less than 5 minutes, so if you're a fan of One Piece theory or One Piece lore, then strap in. After that, I'm going to explain how green blood was used to create Poseidon through some pretty awful experiments. But without further ado, like and sub, and let's get into it. Dressrosa was where SAD was manufactured. SAD was a green substance often marked with radioactive warning signs. This connects to the fact SAD was used to facilitate a change in physical form. We know that it was put in smiles to make zone users, for example. The substance is a mix of lineage factors from a variety of animals, and when SAD is put into the fruits to create smiles, the lineage factor is intended to alter the user's body and give them the characteristics of a specific type of animal. So body shape, strength, speed, stuff like this. The vats that contained SAD discovered by Law had a prominent prominent nuclear symbol on the center of each tank. Nuclear is often characterized as green and can often be seen associated with mutation in media. It was first introduced in chapter 690 alongside a page from Karibo's cover story where he is sick but is mistaken as someone else due to the uncanny resemblance that the two characters share. I wonder if that is also a hint to mutation, and that's what's going on with Karibo, but that's another story for another time. Anyway, negotiations for SAD took place on Greenbit. Greenbit is difficult to reach due to the mutated fish that attack the bridge that connects Dressrosa to Greenbit. The fighting fish did not come from anywhere else, but instead are mutations of the huge goldfish that are present there. We discover this by looking at the fighting line, fighting bull, and the local goldfish. All have distinct attributes that can be traced onto the fighting fish. What makes this important, however, is that these mutations are likely caused by the pollution from the production of SAD and its radioactive nature, as seen on the storage tanks, as I mentioned. This is echoed by the Impel Down zone users with failed awakenings. For more information on these guards and how they probably came from Carmel and Big Mum's Lamb's house, you can check out my Big Mum video. Greenbit is home to a very wild forest, as described by Caesar and Lore, full of different species of fauna and flora. It also looks out of place, appearing as if the bridge is holding it in place, which might be why the bridge was described to be made of iron in the first place, as iron is known to be very strong. Greenbit is similar to one other forest in the entire One Piece world, which happens to share a similar name. This forest is Greenstone Forest. Greenstone Forest has wild fauna just like Greenbit, and is the location KUMA sent Usopp during the time skip. Usopp was taught by Heracles, a beetle person, and Greenbit heavily featured beetles also. Usopp learnt how pop greens work on Greenstone Forest, which are also known to have strange physical forms. However, instead of a cross between a person and an animal, like with SAD, pop greens look like a mixture of a person and a plant. This is also highlighted by the plants' names, such as Human Drake. The name is a play on Mandrake, a plant humanoid creature best known for screaming in the Harry Potter scene, but here Oda has highlighted the human side by adding Hu to the standard word Mandrake, making Human Drake. The Boyne Archipelago is a territory made from fauna, and we see this description with only one other place in the world. This is the Sabaody Archipelago, a location best known for bubbles produced by the resin of the local plants and trees. Both archipelagos are called archipelagos despite the fact they're primarily trees and plants, and there's no actual islands present. Because of this, neither have a magnetic pull that can be navigated with. Greenbit is the same shape as Sabaody, and both sit close together in paradise. On Sabaody we see flying fish riders who share a similar name to the fighting fish of Greenbit. The above all suggests that green blood has ties to the Boyne Archipelago, particularly noticeable through the word green that we keep seeing repeated. But there is one other distinct feature we are shown with green blood, and that is the bubbles, which we can see in the armband looking thing that shows inside of the Seraphim arm. Now this is fascinating because when trying to solve this mystery, we ended up discovering, as I say, Sabaody seems tied to the Boyne Archipelago, and Sabaody is best known for what? Its bubbles. So it could be that the only two fauna-made territories, both archipelagos, both with strange life, were once one place. Anyway, to the point, it would seem green blood is a combination of the fauna from the Boyne Archipelago, which is where it gets its green colour, and the fauna from Sabaody, which is where we get the bubbles from. This might be revealed to be a combination of plant extract and tree resin, essentially. When mixed with Lunarian lineage factor, the green blood appears to facilitate great physical changes, longer lifespans than we've seen with other world government experiments, for example, and also the capacity to seemingly use any devil fruit. Green blood may have byproducts the world government, Vegapunk, and the reader are not yet aware of also, as hinted by the strange connection between S-Bear and KUMA that led to KUMA heading for Egghead Island. The connection could be a feature of lineage factor or just a connection to the original host through the green blood, but we essentially saw Lucci command S-Bear to fly over to Egghead, and then KUMA carried out the order at the panel after. And yeah, if you wanted more information on it, my last video was about that. Moving on, lastly, outside the canon, one of the One Piece movies adds to this whole thing. So thanks to Kuba the Red Sea for this one. Always tells me about the movies because I don't watch them that much or as much as I should. But he pointed out the green substance in the drug sick was used to facilitate the mutation of animals so they could change form, for example, becoming giant. After being shown multiple versions of green substances throughout the story that are ultimately used to shift the user into a more powerful state, we finally peak with green blood, it appears. A perfected version of the green substances, and the chemical used in Seraphim, which are cyborgs with a childlike appearance that are stated to rapidly learn as they grow older. Considering the rest of their appearance is very Lunarian, it would suggest that the final part of the formula required was the lineage factor of the Lunarians to make the green blood work, which is why we see all these failed experiments like failed giants and stuff like that. They were missing this peak technology. This definitely might tie into why we saw King being experimented on, particularly with alongside Kaido, who was like a Joy Boy candidate. So this might be a reflection of events that happened in the past that are similar, or some sort of parallel like that, which we do see in One Piece a lot. It's also, I mean, it's even possible it's King's DNA that allowed Vegapunk to take the technology and perfect green blood and be able to put it into a Seraphim. Here is where things get a lot darker, as there is one important detail I did intentionally leave out. Interestingly, the fighting fish have been around Greenbit for 200 years, which is longer than the SAD operations have been going on. So it suggests this type of science and pollution is probably something that's been happening before the SAD thing even came up. I do still believe that the SAD pollution continued to make the fighting fish, but is there any possibility similar experiments and mutations were being carried out 200 years ago in the One Piece world when the fighting fish first arrived? The answer is yes. What happened 200 years ago in the One Piece world? The giant mech attacked Maryjois around the same time slavery was abolished to secure a treaty between fishmen and the world government. This was the first time Ryugu Palace attended the reverie, and they did not attend again for another 200 years. Poseidon is currently embodied by Shirahoshi, the daughter of King Neptune, who is the head of Ryugu Palace. Poseidon is considered an ancient weapon because of her tremendous power to control marine life with her mind. Poseidon is also said to reincarnate every few hundred years, but the reason why has not been explicitly stated yet. However, looking at Poseidon through the scope of green blood, we can start to piece together how modern Poseidon actually came to be. 200 years ago, fighting fish appeared, suggesting similar radioactive pollution that we see at Dressrosa currently. It's possible during the reverie, happening around the same time, the king of Ryugu Palace had his daughter kidnapped, as we often see suggested through Shirahoshi's character in the current storyline. Some believe fishmen were created by the world government to begin with, so it would be fitting thematically for the world government to use the abolishment of fisherman slavery as a ruse to capture a mermaid with the intention of experimenting on her in a similar way. We know there is demand for mermaid slaves from the extremely high prices found on the auction list. The world government may have captured the mermaid princess, which is what would have summoned the giant to come to Maryjois, and once they've got her imprisoned, potentially implanted her with the lineage factor of a sea king. By doing this, the world government recreated Poseidon. The lineage factor with fishmen is highlighted to be pretty unpredictable, which is displayed through their family trees, and it may be the same for merfolk. So the transformation into Poseidon may have been unintentional. Instead, it may have been a result of the lineage factor of the princess mixing with the lineage factor of a sea king, and them two specifically working together to create or recreate Poseidon, as that is what Poseidon originally was. Additionally, if Poseidon does require Sea King lineage factor, or comes from Sea Kings originally, then this might be why Poseidon takes so long to reincarnate, because Sea Kings are known to live hundreds of years. Also, Shirahoshi is huge, particularly compared to her own father, so again we see hints towards Sea King lineage. If this was how Poseidon was remade, then it would make sense that Poseidon would discover or unleash her ability to escape imprisonment and go on to be free. Also, it would match up with the Pseudo-Uranus Mother Flame, and if we get a Pluton upgrade with the Sunny or Frankie, then that would be 3 modern versions of ancient weapons. The technology may have then been continued or rediscovered and utilized on God Valley to develop a perfected version later on by Vegapunk, which we now see as green blood. Anyway, that's all for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed what we had in store, and if so, like and give it a share. If you've made it this far, you've just won a fighting fish. Let me know in the comments where you want it delivered. Thank you for watching this far. You are the best, and peace. Welcome. Today we're looking at Emu's powers. why the GOROSEI do her bidding, and also her fatal weakness. If you're into One Piece manga or fairly caught up on the anime, you'll have no problem following along, so make sure to let me know if any of your conclusions are different to what we find in the comments. So without further ado, let's begin this with a bang, and I'll bring in our special guest, Dax, shortly to drop some nuclear chain reactions. Now, over to young Usopp to bring us in with the intro track. Let's go.
Come on, you gotta pick up the phone.
Yeah. Hello?
Yo, you home right now?
Yeah.
Bro, I can't believe this video is wild.
Oh, word?
It's Dan
He has another
Coochie.
video out?
Yes, sir.
Oh, the gold.
It's Dan Coochie. Yeah, he's back again. Y'all better like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. Know the gang already know the vibes. These videos make you open your eyes. Trust me, they'll blow your mind. Now just kick back, relax, and unwind for the video.
What's with Cypherpole looking like the GOROSEI? How do Dendens change shape to match their user? And how do Vivre cards guide us to a person? It's time to solve Emu's power and another One Piece mystery. So like, sub, and let's get into this. In the Mads cover story, we saw a focus on lineage factor. Each cover story showed how each Mads member utilized these blueprints of life differently. For example, Caesar used lineage factor to attempt to make ancient giants for the world government. Queen made ice onis, Judge made cyborg children, Stussy made vampires, and Vegapunk made pacifistas, etc. There are other examples, but the point is each scientist developed a different version of the same technology. So why is this important? Well, remember that energy source that Vegapunk referenced? What if I told you that every power in the One Piece world derived from that specific source? Even the GOROSEI shadows from 1084. Even the mystical clouds that surround Gear 5 Luffy and awakened Lucci. Just like how Mads each had a variation of lineage factor, this power was taken and harnessed in different ways, each time giving a different result. So today we're looking at how Emu uses this power. So let's start with Life Return. Life Return is the name of a technique explained to us by KUMA to mean the complete control of one's own body. The name itself implies energy returning from a source to the user. The process for Haki is the process for Life Return in reverse. Instead of will manifesting physically, it's the physical converting into the will. So, with food for example, the person eats the food and becomes reinvigorated by it. Absorption is a life return technique and can turn a large amount of food into nutrition and vitality almost immediately. Life return includes being able to change the body's shape and its processes, even including the user's hair. The ability can be used in conjunction with a devil fruit, as we see with Lucci, who uses it to manipulate his zone forms. He's a character that went on to become awakened, which I'll touch on later. We can see a similar effect with Don Chin-Zhao, as he used his family's ability, Hashokan, to harden and control his Patrick-looking starfish head. Another example is Fukurokuju, who uses his big ol' earlobes as weapons and also to throw projectiles, which is similar to Life Return. Poorly using his ropes in combat mimics this also. Noodle Kempo is another solid candidate for working the same way as Life Return, using body hair to cut noodles for instance. Interestingly, he actually consumes some noodles, which I'll touch on soon. Chopper states he's heard of a similar ability to Life Return, named biofeedback. Biofeedback is a real-world term that also means the complete control over one's own body, to the point where you can slow your heart rate down, which is often how free diving records are achieved. Chopper is a medical chemist, and his rumble balls also can be seen to shift his zone forms, similar to how Lucci uses Life Return with his zone. If consuming medicine can change your form like Life Return, and food can too, like with Noodle Kempo, and through the Life Return technique absorption, then it's likely metabolism is involved. Big Mum ate Carmel and got the soul fruit, and some theorize Blackbeard ate part of Whitebeard to gain the tremor fruit, both again suggesting metabolism is relevant. If consuming something and metabolizing it changes your form, this would explain why Kaido changes state so often during the roof battle, as he's constantly consuming alcohol. Both Zoro and Odin are known to drink a lot of booze and have both themselves inflated their biceps in a very similar way to Life Return. If consuming alcohol can change someone's state, then it may suggest Binks Sake was some sort of medical or energy infusion that may even extend life. Did Shanks bring Whitebeard Sake to prolong his life while he was sick maybe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Anyway, it might be that whatever the user consumes can be converted by life into strength or physical prowess. Milk was used by Brook to repair his skull and regrow a tooth. Luffy regrew a tooth but without the milk, which is weird. Another example is how devil fruits work, and most fruits shift the user's form, like life return. The change in state is also highlighted by Streusen when he was present during Big Mom eating Carmel. He watched as he used his Koku no Mi to cut a tree log into meat. This is Oda showing us the exact opposite of what happens when Big Mom ate Carmel and inherited her power. This is because will is stored in trees in the One Piece world, and Streusen's cutting into physical meat. In other words, Big Mom is taking flesh imbued with devil fruit abilities and consuming it, turning it into her own will. Streusen, however, is taking will in the form of a tree log and turning it into flesh. A good example of this outside of One Piece is Popeye. He eats his spinach and his muscles bulge. We see this most commonly with Luffy and Kid, who blow up like balloons after eating a load of meat, then quickly pushing themselves back down to normal size, energizing them afterwards. Luffy has interesting ties to lifespan in the story, and let's not even bring up Kid's lifespan, but yeah. Furthermore, Bonnie can often be seen eating meat in the same way Luffy and Kid do, and she's also deeply tied to lifespan through her powers. Shinobu was shown to age. Momonosuke references an age state of the fruit, so that's another interesting tie there. Maybe the type of food affects a specific aspect of the user. We touched on alcohol and meat, but we also see the babies at Punk Hazard are fed candy to make them grow. Big Mom's parents spoke about her being spoiled from a young age with candy, leading her to become big and have destructive tantrums when hungry. Also, later on, her mother figure was called Carmel, a name tied to candy, of course. Additionally, we have Sugar herself, who's particularly small for her age, and her name ties to candy. She has the physical appearance of a child, despite being 22. So here we have three characters heavily tied to sweet food, all have disproportionate bodies, and also obscure ties to youth. Let's get spicier though. You may not know this, but Sengoku, Garp, and Suru all joined the Marines in the same year. Now, what's fascinating about this is Suru and Garp are the only ones in the Navy with old grey hair. Now, Garp can constantly be seen eating, which is strongly highlighted by his new TCG card. Sengoku is the only one of the three with coloured hair, which was black of course, but mysteriously he ages quickly after retiring as a fleet admiral, and his hair immediately turns grey. From here on out, we also see him constantly eating. Weird. So again, we have ties to consumption, youth, and or aging. This could just be thematic. We see Magellan chooses to eat super spicy food despite its volatile effects, and we assume it's coincidence his fruit has a similar style to it. Or maybe they are tied and Blackbeard eats cherry pie to somehow influence will and fate through the cherry blossom. We know eating 2 devil fruits seems to unalive the user, and yet Blackbeard may have consumed some of Whitebeard to gain his fruit. However, despite all this, consuming certain things has been demonstrated to end a user's life prematurely before, particularly with medical chemistry. Medical chemistry is potentially the most overlooked facet in One Piece, and will likely become super important soon. Throughout the story, medicine is consumed, displaying different effects. Most prominently is likely Chopper, who changes his animal-human hybrid form by using rumble balls, a medicine he made himself. This is indicative of life return, as I touched on earlier. Rumble balls are highly advanced and appear to be able to achieve hybridization in a way that the world government was yet to match up until we saw Lucci's awakened form, despite multiple experiments it seems. However, an example that would end the user's life prematurely can be seen with Hero Water. It was shown in Alabasta to give a strong power-up, followed by an inevitable death. It resembled life return too, as the appearance of the guards that drank it changed. Hody Jones hit the energy steroids hard, giving him a massive power that also changed his appearance, made him pale, and again led to his early death. Our buddy Ivankov gives a concoction of hormones to Luffy that pretty much revives him. The downside though was it costs him 10 years of Luffy's lifespan, suggesting that if you were to abuse these hormones, you'd inevitably die from decreased lifespan, just like Hody's energy steroids and the Hero Water. Alternatively, however, when Hiruluk was dying, we saw Kureha give him medicine that prolonged his life, although not for very long. So we again see examples of consumption that changes the user's physical form and affects their lifespan, both decreasing it and increasing it in some cases. To summarize, it appears that in the One Piece world, people can consume medicine to concentrate the remaining life force into power, which in turn changes the user's physical form. Again, this is the similar process described by Cypherpole as life return. An interesting side note, we learn in Water 7 that ships can have a soul that appears in sprite form at the end of the ship's life. This is interesting because it echoes what we've been saying. Remaining life force is concentrated, resulting in a powerful shift in the user's form, in this case with with the Mary's Klabauterman shifting from spirit to a physical sprite as the ship burned. Now, another character that ties to all of this is Lao Ji, who can concentrate his remaining lifespan to boost his physical stats to a point that he reached in his youth. He grows in size and becomes far stronger, which in the same process as we know can be achieved via life return or eating. So, what's very interesting here is that without using his ability, Lao Ji appears weak and pale. Paleness seems to be a feature of aging or a shortened lifespan in One Piece. Illness and disease are known to make people pale and affect lifespan. So, for example, tree fever causes a person to turn pale, covers them in white marks, and they often die young. Interestingly, Doc Q has the sick fruit, and he looks very old considering he's only actually 28. Amber Lead is white, and Amber Lead syndrome turns people pale white. The disease also decreases your lifespan generationally, and so may also tie into lineage factor as well. The opposite of this can be seen when some characters glow with a pink hue. We see this with Gear 2nd Luffy, Whitebeard at Marineford, and Big Mom in Wano, and each of these cases ties to lifespan. This pink sheen likely indicates the characters are in peak form and are burning their remaining lifespan quicker, whereas the pale look could represent a weak lifespan, which is evident in the diseases of the One Piece world. Now, going back to Amber Lead syndrome, it seems peculiar that there's such a disease so close to Maryjois, as it's often speculated Emu, and for example the Gorosei, potentially have extended life. Maybe even the Celestial Dragons too, however we're not sure yet. The world government's biggest recent enemy, Roger, was afflicted by an illness that would have killed him prematurely, and we saw it also with Brook's original captain, Yorkie. It makes me think that Nami got pretty lucky at Drum Island, as she was very pale and not looking great at all. Luckily she was saved by Kureha, a character with a reputation for repeatedly stating she has a secret to youth. She lives in a tree, and trees have great significance in the One Piece world, for example with Ohara. Trees hold wills, and as I stated, from what we've seen, it's possible to turn energy like will into life force. So it's possible Kureha is using life return on the tree that she lived in to transmit energy to herself to keep her in her prime. The voice of all things and breath of all things both suggest all things contain some form of will or energy or voice or breath. Vegapunk's ancient energy source he referred to is likely from this same source, so will or the voice of all things or something around that. In the Matrix, they refer to a similar source of energy, and they also literally name it the source. Kureha is shown to still be young and not pale, so it's interesting that despite Kureha's youthfulness, she still looks old. It could be that life return can keep you from losing strength, but does not protect a body from the aging process, which will inevitably lead to the user's death. Now, who is the only human we suspect to be older than Kureha? Emu. Someone who lives next to or atop of the Great Eve Tree, a tree that gives off light, potentially the same light we see beaming down on the throne. Also, if the user of this technique stays youthful but the body gets old, you could make a case for Emu requiring the immortal surgery, which would explain the OP's insane bounty. In 406, Kumadori introduces us to life return and mentions he gained the power from living a hermit life, which means a life of isolation. Both Kureha and Emu could certainly be said to live a hermit's life, with Kureha literally being called a mountain witch. Not only this, but Kumadori casually states it takes 2,000 years to master. Wait, what did you say, Kumadori? That's a ridiculous concept for Oda to bring up, unless someone has actually lived that long. So how has that come about? Well, it just so happens that there is someone who lived roughly 2,000 years ago, told to us in the Alabaster arc. Robin lies about the contents of the Alabaster poneglyph to Crocodile, instead seemingly reciting information she already knew about the past, or alternatively, reading some of the extra info on the poneglyph that didn't concern Pluton. Robin refers to the hero of Atreya, Mamudine. Atreya is a very niche real-world reference to a woman called the Lady of Atreya, a woman in the background of history who married a very important man and gave birth to a very great king. Her life story involves love, betrayal, and royalty, and fits many of the themes people speculate about Emu today. The name of the hero Mamudine contains the symbol Mu. That name was recently highlighted by Cobra in his last moments in the throne room, and likely ties to the name Emu. Another interesting point was actually given to me by my 19-month-old son, believe it or not, who can barely talk. His friend is Bulgarian and Romanian, and because of it, instead of saying mummy, he says mamu sometimes. Mamu is the Bulgarian term for mummy. Lady of Atreya is from the Ottoman Empire, which is in part modern-day Bulgaria. So Mamudine actually translates to Mother of Jinn. Jinn describes a spirit that can influence the living, so Mamudine literally can translate as Mother of Influential Spirit. So maybe Imu is actually the child of the hero of a trail, or the hero herself, Mamudine, and she can possibly influence the spirit or life force of others. Kumadori was a member of Cypherpol, and Cypherpol is a group that partly makes up the Celestial Dragon's true strength, allowing them to even know about secret taboos. Some members of Cypherpol also have relatives that are also in Cypherpol. This could indicate that they might have a particular lineage factor there. CP9 members are also seen with a solid grasp of life return. What's crazy though is Cypherpol eventually fled the world government after their defeat from Luffy. They went to what seems to be a secret location with overgrown ruins. Later, they were found by the Navy in the cover of 522, looking eerily similar to what we see with the Gorosei in 1084. We can see their animalistic silhouetted forms, but we know that they don't look like that usually, just like the Gorosei. They're potentially using life return to shift their shape, as Lucci was shown to do so. They have the same eyes as we saw with the Gorosei too. So when the Gorosei go crazy in 1084, is life return also being used in some way to control their forms? That's the question. And if so, is their lifespan affected like the examples I made earlier? It's even possible Cypherpol 9 was traced back to their hidden spot where they were hiding out through a similar technique as well. A clue to this can be again found in Kumadori controlling his hair with life return, which is actually more spicy than it might seem.
And the thing about all of this is that the importance of hair in One Piece just cannot be understated. It's one of Oda's biggest symbols of individuality, so much so that it's one of the most common things that Luffy uses to give nicknames with, like calling Bartolomeo Rooster, thinking Marco looks like a pineapple, and even calling Foxy Two-Piece Head, which is one of the many reasons that I believe the One Piece to be an afro, since Luffy called Foxy that while wearing one, making him the One Piece Head. This layer of individuality that hairstyles tend to give could tie into the fact that Viver cards are able to seek out the specific person that they came from, almost like it ties directly to the soul. I mean, Brook's afro is the only thing that will signify his return to Laboon since he has nothing but bones now, and this is a person who transcended death with just the power of his soul and his devil fruit. So when we talk about Viver cards, which can essentially take your fingernail clipping and not only detect your location, but also the status of your soul, then we need to just accept the fact that hair, or keratin at the very least, and souls are deeply connected in some major way. And I know my boy Den has been cooking about life return this whole video, and what better person is there to learn about that than from the guy whose life literally returned after death? Now that might seem just like a joke, especially since Brook hasn't actually used life return before, but that's the thing. He sort of has used it before because he's moving an entire body around when it really shouldn't. If we think Kumadori using his hair individually is impressive, well, Brook is over here busy operating an entire skeleton. There's undoubtedly some important connection to be made between hair, souls, Viver cards, and life return, which sets up the afro to yet again shine as one of Oda's most underrated story elements. But that's enough from me, so let's go ahead and get back into the video.
Den Mushis also translate a signal over extremely long distances and demonstrate life return by changing their body shape to match their user. We also know these transmissions can be hacked, as we saw with Greenbull in Wano, or traced, as we saw with Sabo on Lelia. In other words, if Cypherpol used life return to change their shape, or if this power was somehow given to them by Imu, it could be that they are bound somehow, despite the long distance, and thus can be tracked and traced, similar to a Vibra card's source. The above suggests that Emu could potentially be transmitting or using life return on other subjects too. This could be why every member of the Gorosei in Cypherpol 9 show this ability to turn into silhouette beasts potentially. To make this easier to understand, here's a wildly similar parallel from another piece of media. For those who aren't familiar with Lord of the Rings, there are these 9 humans that were each given a powerful magic ring. These were known as wraiths. The rings gave the humans extended life, but also secretly bound the humans' lives to the maker of the rings. This means that they had to carry out the ringmaker's bidding, no matter what. Over time, the 9 humans became more shadow-like in appearance from living extended lives, echoing the image we saw of the Holy Knights. This could be exactly what we saw with Emu and the Gorosei, and maybe also CP9's silhouettes. Not only that, but the Holy Knights were shown as shadows, and the Gorosei are suspected to make up 5 of the Knights, so possibly all 9 could be wraiths, just like in Lord of the Rings. Now, this makes me wonder, do Emu's abilities have any weaknesses, clauses, or conditions? Surprisingly, something did actually stand out when I looked into this. There is a very strange condition we see now and then in One Piece, where someone's abilities stop working even if they're from a devil fruit. This condition is fear. On Long Ring Longland, people's body morph and stretch, similar to the shape-shifting seen with Life Return. Fascinatingly, Usopp and Chopper state they're scared to go on the island, and that they've developed a sickness. These are the only two characters on Long Ring Longland that are affected by the stretching environment. Additionally, we see a hare that's stretched, and hares are renowned for being timid and afraid. In contrast, we see the calm Tonji is ironically very short, perhaps further suggesting only scared people are affected. Another example is Big Mom's Devil Fruit ability. It only works on people that fear her. We see a twist on this with Sugar's Devil Fruit, which switches off when she's scared. Chopper scared Kumadori by roaring, which caused Kumadori to lose control of his hair that he'd hardened using Life Return, yet another example of fear taking effect on the body. Monet was frozen in fear by Zoro. Some less obvious examples could be what we saw recently with Kobe's honesty impact, which rather than being suppressed by fear, could instead be amplified by it. Garp spoke a lot to Kobe about coming in clutch, so it's possible this is what he meant. Furthermore, Vivi screams in fear, which perhaps is what caused it to start raining in the Alabasta arc. Lastly, and this isn't something I've looked into too deeply, but it's possible Usopp's lies, which sometimes come true, only come true when he's afraid. So, how do you create fear in the One Piece world? Well, the world government controls people by implementing fear through propaganda. But what about the Gorosei and Cypherpole, who are above these people? The Gorosei aren't scared of a phantom in the Maryjois like the guards, because they know of Imu's existence already. So what are they afraid of, if that's what's required for Imu's power to work in order to make them loyal subjects? Well, I think it's possible Imu might have the fear fruit, or definitely some intense fear ability. Smiling in the face of death would be the antithesis of this power, making the D-Clan members Imu's natural enemy. Luffy himself, particularly in Gear 5, is the ultimate example of Life Return. As Luffy died, Luffy's life was returned to him, and then he could change into any form, not just his own. So he does make a perfect antithesis. Anyway, in conclusion, I think that Imu is using the power of the Eve Tree to essentially transmit energy into some of her subjects, such as the Gorosei. By doing this, she can keep them sustained in their prime for decades, as well as giving them the ability to better control their hybrid forms. It's possible Imu has been getting better at these techniques over the past 2 millennia, and is finally now at a point of mastery, which might even mean Imu can actually prevent the body from aging like Kureha can't. This would explain why the Gorosei look identical to what they appeared as over 20 years ago at the Ohara incident. It would also work for Sengoku's seemingly random sudden age spurt after his retirement. Others may be able to achieve similar powers by consuming certain foods, it seems. Lastly, it's worth noting that recently Garp highlighted the importance of youth again, and many characters have brought up youth throughout the story. So maybe that's it. Imu has a secret to youth, just like Kureha. Maybe she used the Opi Nomi to make her body last longer than it should, and the Gorosei and Lucci's awakening are even likely bound to Imu in the same way. There's plenty more to build on, but for now I'm just going to leave it here. Thanks for making it this far. You've just won a free Noodle Kempo shaving kit. Let me know where you need it to be delivered. Thanks to Dak as always. Much love to TLA. Much love to Smokey. Much love to all of everyone. Everyone. Right, let's go. Welcome back, fellow pirates and One Piece fans. Today we delve into an exciting theory that explores the hidden connection between two powerful figures in the world of One Piece, Aokiji and Garp. Could there be more to their relationship that meets the eye, and what will happen to both of them next? Okay, sub, like, do all that stuff, and let's get into it. Throughout the One Piece storyline, Aokiji, the enigmatic former admiral, and Garp, the legendary marine hero, have had several encounters that leave us wondering about their true connection. Some fans believe there might be a deeper bond between the two, extending beyond their roles as allies or adversaries. We just saw them go head-to-head at Hachinosu before KUZAN turned Garp into a popsicle. Remember, the last time KUZAN froze someone, they didn't die, so what's going to happen to Garp? It might be possible Blackbeard trades him into the world government, and Imu puts him in the Maryjois freezer just for him to later break out and cause havoc. Or maybe Garp is actually gone, and KUZAN knew he had to be the one to do it, giving off a whole Snape Harry Potter loyalty vibe.
Hey everybody, Randy Troy here. I'm going to talk about two of my favorite characters to talk about, Garp and KUZAN. Yes, they are two very enigmatic characters indeed, and the recent Hachi Nosu content that we have been getting has been shining a new light on their relationship. Now, we were introduced to Garp, not necessarily by name, but by idea from KUZAN during the Long Ring Longland arc. Granted, we did see him unnamed during the Kobe Meppo cover story, and he was also in the Romance Dawn pilot. That's a whole a whole other thing. But the relationship between these two characters is interesting because KUZAN was used as a device to introduce Garp into the story by way of Luffy. So already you were setting up that these two characters had a deeper connection than what was necessarily on the page, right? And it goes in line with the theme that the person that you hold in regard to almost like a father isn't always the person that is biologically related to you. It's often the person that you actually look up to and the person that fuels your own ideals and desires and just your dream, right? We see this with Luffy and Shanks. We see it with Sabo and Dragon, with Ace and Whitebeard, with Sanji and Zeph, with Chopper and Hiriluk. None of those characters are their actual biological father. And I believe that the Hachi Nosu content of it all was to establish that KUZAN and Garp have this same familial bond, in the same way that a Luffy and a Shanks does. Garp was the person that KUZAN always looked up to. This was blatant, even going back to Chapter 0 when, the two of them are walking and KUZAN is following him like a puppy dog, talking about how cool it is that he denied his promotion. This lines up much later on when KUZAN fights Sakazuki for a promotion, doesn't get it, and then leaves the Marines. Now, there's a lot of speculation about Sword. I've been one of the most vocal people that Garp is either the leader of Sword or at the very least the inspiration for it. This man that doesn't want anything to do with the Celestial Dragons, and you see the way that Sword moves. It seems like it's a organization within the Marines to secretly overthrow the government or the system. And it seems like that is very much Garp's MO, and we see this in Marineford when he doesn't help Ace. Why doesn't he help Ace? Because it's mission over family. And when we're talking about this Snape kills Dumbledore idea of it all, that really lines up with KUZAN and Garp, because if it is mission over family or found family, and there was ever going to be a situation where KUZAN is still undercover, deep cover, in Sword, not in Sword, but still against Blackbeard, right? If there was a situation where he had to play his role and make sure that Blackbeard maintained this idea that KUZAN was with him, right? One of the biggest ways to do that would be to have KUZAN in a twist be the person to actually kill Garp. Now, I feel like that opportunity has kind of left the story, especially if we jump really far away from Hachinosu. Now, if in the next coming chapters or anything like that, we go back to Hachinosu, then I think it's still in play and it's on the table. But if we end Egghead, we go into the next arc and we continue from there, I think KUZAN killing Garp becomes a little less likely, but it is still a great opportunity for KUZAN to show his allegiance to Blackbeard. And then we could flip that on its head later on in a scenario where now he has to show his allegiance again, but it's against Robin. And then that's where KUZAN draws the line, right? Because this also goes into the whole idea of what Garp was trying to teach all of his proteges in the first place. You leave the old man and you save the child, right? KUZAN saved the child at Ohara. These words were probably echoed to him by Garp even as long ago as, 22 years ago, or even longer. So we have a situation here where KUZAN's going to be put in that exact predicament, and he's going to have to, not save the old man. But I also believe that he is currently saving the old man, because when we see Garp being turned into a popsicle, as everybody likes to call it, what I see is actually a man that's kind of almost cauterizing the wound that was given to Garp by Shiryu, because the only icicle on him is it's at his stab wound. So KUZAN is still the same man. That's what he told Smoker at the end of Punk Hazard. He hasn't changed. So for us to buy into the idea that he is completely evil, that he's working for Blackbeard, that doesn't make any sense. He doesn't want to hurt Garp. He's just got to play his role. So that's where the Snape versus Dumbledore of it all would happen. Garp would allow himself to die to KUZAN if it was for the mission. If it meant ultimately that they would get their goal of destroying and toppling the government, then that's the best case scenario for Garp. And if Garp has any sort of issue with the way that KUZAN is moving right now, he need not look any further than a mirror, because KUZAN is just following an extreme version of Garp's ideals. Garp moves like he is not in the Marines. He moves like he is his own faction. So having a son that became a revolutionary, having a grandson that became a pirate, and having KUZAN also become a pirate, a commander for Yonko, and even Kobe being a member of SWORD, tendering his resignation. That is all situations and examples of his family, his proteges, his mentees choosing freedom over being controlled. So Garp's just got to look in the mirror on that one. And that's going to do it for me. I'm going to turn the mic back over, but I appreciate you having me, and enjoy the rest of the video.
So, let's consider their shared connection to the Marines. Ayakiji's association with the Straw Hat Pirates and subsequent departure from the Marines hints at an unconventional ideology at odds with the world government. Could Garp, known for his free-spirited nature, have influenced Ayakiji's ideals? But this is just the beginning. When we closely examine their characters, Ayakiji and Garp display a striking combination of similarities and differences. Both possess an unwavering sense of justice and have shown a willingness to challenge the authority they serve. Perhaps Ayakiji found his defiance through Garp and the world government's corrupt practices, as I touched on earlier. Garp is the first admiral to be introduced pre-timeskip, and KUZAN, although former, is the first admiral to appear post-timeskip. In kanji, KUZAN means 9 mountains, which is interesting considering Garp was said to destroy mountains. Furthermore, Ayakiji's actions during the Ohara incident raise intriguing questions. Ayakiji, despite being a Marine admiral, allowed Nico Robin to escape, defying his duty to execute her. We see he preserves Saul, rather than unaliving him, leading Saul to go on to save the books of Ohara. Garp was assigned the task of executing the government's orders and destroying Ohara. However, despite his refusal over his friendship with Ohara's archaeologist Clover, Garp arrived too late to stop the destruction. Witnessing the devastation, Garp lets his emotions get the better of him, and he confronted his superiors. Additionally, in the series it's revealed that Garp has played a significant role in training KUZAN during his early years in the Marines. This mentor-student dynamic further establishes a connection between the two characters. Okon's very hacky heavy and doesn't have a devil fruit, which is the opposite of who's very devil fruit heavy, with it being revealed that when he went to Garp for training, he had no mastery over haki yet. This is illustrated quite well in their fight at Hachinosu also. I think KUZAN will go on to re-establish a new justice for himself and a new version of Sword. From all the ties they share with Smoker, I think it's fair to assume Smoker will be KUZAN's second in command, and Toshigi will be like Smoker's meat shield or something along them lines. The big question is, does this sword take over the Marines in the end game? Or like, do they convince the Marines to join the Straw Hats in their fight against Blackbeard? And with that, we conclude our theory on the potential connection between Aokiji and Garp and their futures, two significant figures in the world of One Piece. Make sure to like and sub. As the story continues to unfold, we can only hope that Oda will shed more light on their relationship and the factors that have shaped their paths. Until then, let's eagerly anticipate the weight of the next chapter of this incredible venture. A little extra info for those who are still here. Garp was born on May the 2nd, the day after May Day. May Day is the UK celebration for the start of summer. So Garp was born the day after the start of summer, fitting, because Luffy, obviously, Luffy's the sun god. Aokiji's birthday is the 21st of September, which is International Peace Day. Last thing, Oda, this is fact, right? I'm not lying. Oda stated that KUZAN Jr., if you follow what I mean, is actually made of ice. So there's something new for you to learn today, if you haven't learned anything else from the video. If you made it this far, you've just won a free pack of Garpsicles, so just make sure to keep them cool, and you guys have a good day. Do something nice for somebody else, I guess. Big love and peace. Hello there, fellow pirates. Welcome back to Denden Kushi. Today we have a mind-blowing theory that will take you on an incredible journey through the history of the One Piece world and the fascinating Pangea theory. Before we dive into the theory though, make sure you drop a like and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our upcoming theories. Alright, let's get started. Have you ever wondered how the formation of the One Piece world could parallel the real world Pangea theory? Well, let's get into this one and start connecting some of the dots. In the One Piece world, we have the Grand Line, a treacherous and mysterious sea that separates the world into 4 oceans. But what if I told you that this division and formation of the Grand Line could be similar to how the continents on Earth were connected? According to the real-world Pangea theory, millions of years ago, all the continents on Earth were connected as one giant landmass called Pangea. Over time, due to tectonic plate movements, they drifted apart, forming the continents we know today. Now, let's apply this concept to the One Piece world. So, the real-life Pangea depicted a D shape that spread across half the world with bodies of water within. In One Piece, it's possible the world was originally mostly sea, with one D-shaped long ring of land that made up a supercontinent, similar to this. On Long Ring Long Land, the tides change periodically, lowering sea levels and creating land bridges. This allowed people to cross to the other side of the continent every set amount of years. This could be reminiscent of events taking place centuries ago with the One Piece Pangea type setting. Each side of the One Piece Pangea was likely ruled over by 2 dominant clans, with the east being controlled by the Monkey Clan and the west belonging to the Dragon Clan. This lends significance to Dragon's name, Monkey D. Dragon. Other clans existed, such as the Serpent and Bird clans, but the most prominent were likely the Monkey and Dragon, who went on to build kingdoms. After the formation of the 2 ancient kingdoms, 2 sovereigns are born, one in the Eastern Monkey Kingdom, or what we know today as the Ancient Kingdom, and another in the Western Dragon Kingdom, which would now be found just off Maryjois. These are the ancestors of the 2 sovereigns the Sea Kings discuss. Eventually, these 2 sovereigns meet, fall in love, and get married. The marriage and subsequent child that's born become a symbol of unification of the East and West to the people of the world. In other words, the baby or the prince or whatever of the 2 sovereigns would have been like a beacon of unity for the whole world to essentially get behind. You do kind of see this in real world situations, even though that's a bit outdated nowadays. However, I believe the arrangement probably unsettled some members of the Dragon Royal family, as it's unlikely they approve of the Monkey family and their unruly ways, similar to how we see current celestial dragons are prejudiced against non-humans, or Saturn's obsession with taking no risks. For example, Luffy has lots of friends that are like non-human, or not that like lots of friends and allies that don't exist in paradise. So Emu, for example, would probably consider that a threat, because of the Celestial Dragon's views on other cultures, and other species, as evidenced by what they did to the fishmen, etc. War ensues, echoing the One Piece world as we know it today, as the West continues to spread and colonize the world and its people. In a last stand, Uranus is created by the Sun Kingdom of the East to lay waste to the Dragon Clan's territory. Fueled by the ancient energy source, the sun. A byproduct of this sun weapon could be the eternal daylight that appears in Enies lobby. After its construction, the weapon is subsequently used to fly above the heart of the Western Kingdom and fire, leaving a huge hole where we now see Enies lobby floating above. And for those who don't know, Enies lobby and this hole is quite close to Maryjois. The force of the strike splits up the supercontinent, causing global earthquakes, mass flooding, and a restructuring of land masses. Furthermore, it leads to a mixture of minerals and substances, such as magma, to explode into the air, forming the Sky Islands, and on a smaller scale, the small floating islands we see at Enies Lobby currently. In Skypiea, it is mentioned about these islands being formed by pyrobloin, and pyrobloin's also been tied to volcanic eruptions in the One Piece world, so that's where we get these ties. The magnetic field of the world is totally changed by the shift of the broken up land masses and the ejection of magnetic materials such as pyrobloin around the globe. The land masses themselves we know contain magnetic materials because of the log poses, so that's what makes that plausible. The islands above Enies Lobby are gradually attracted to float over the centre of the hole due to these newly formed magnetic fields. This is what causes the magnetic fields to appear on the Grand Line, which travel one direction in a continuous loop around the planet, similar to Earth. The closer to the ancient kingdom, the more magnetic material present, which is why the start of the Grand Line requires one lug pose, but later on in the New World, 3 are required to navigate. Because as you get closer to Lodestar, all of these different magnetic things, materials that you've been tracking with the poses, they are all their materials will be found at Lodestar, which creates a real strange magnetic field, or like one that's hard to like distinguish when you're trying to navigate there. It's possible the blast went through the entire planet, pushing up Reverse Mountain into a Reverse Mountain fountain. Now, the water from Enies Lobby we can see falls down the hole, which could push the water out of Reverse Mountain, raising the land. The new magnetic fields pull the ocean down the hole at Enies Lobby, as we see there currently, which is also what we see stated in the Lalesia Aftermath. We know the current magnetic field revolves around the Grand Line, so this magnetic pull may have drawn the water down the side of Reverse Mountain, forcing a new path. This, I believe, is how Reverse Mountain was formed. So the water from Enies Lobby went down the hole, pushed Reverse Mountain up, and then that water was then dragged down the side of Reverse Mountain by the magnetic flow that makes the Grand Line currently. This current is pulled around the globe all the way until it meets itself back at the Reverse Mountain, which is very symbolic of the Borealis, or snake that eats itself, and offers an extra connection to the serpent soaked in blood, which most people fairly assume is the red line because it's red and it goes all the way around. Given the approximate location of Egghead, we could be looking at a perfect crossover between the Uranus blast and the Lalesia blast, crossing and making an X roughly over the core of the planet. Theories that involve a shift in poles are popular at the moment, and I wouldn't argue against the idea. The strike from Uranus may have been responsible for this shift. This would also suggest another reason for a shift in magnetic fields. If the crossover I mentioned is correct, then it could be Oda demonstrating a balancing out of the poles or of the world. Question is, I guess, what's on the other side of the Lalesia hole? I'm not going to speculate it here. You're welcome to let me know in the comments. I know not many people are talking about it, but hopefully we'll find out soon, he says, while fearing for the end of One Piece. So, for a quick summary, we have the supercontinent Pangea, split up by a huge Uranus strike powered by the sun. The landmasses break up and the Grand Line is formed. The survivors of the Western Kingdom potentially took over the rest of their territory, shunning all non-humans and creating part of the world they call paradise, due to the fact it's predominantly human and it's much more favourable in terms of the weather conditions. This theme is interesting. It sort of suggests that like there was a fight for land amongst the humans, which is the opposite of what we've seen in the more modern day One Piece, where there's a fight for land for non-humans due to the humans. So it's an interesting contrast to consider. The New World becomes a land of extreme climates and powerful natural phenomena. Volcanoes were erupting, creating fiery landscapes, while thunderstorms raged across the skies, making navigation even more perilous. The unwanted peoples and races are pushed to the New World, where they adapt to survive. Okay, so moving forward a little, these refugees, for lack of a better term, begin to gather together, similar to what we hear at the Fishmen and the Light of the Eve Tree after being pushed into the sea. The challenge and the mystery of the New World, I think, also invited explorers and pirates to come and set sail and find treasure and discover mysteries. These newfound alliances may have led to rebellions. I believe this is when Emu began to start fearing for the return of the Sun Kingdom. Subsequently, the government builds their own superweapon, but instead of using the power of the sun, it uses the power of the moon. This is the creation of Pluton. Pluton can currently be found in Wano, a place that's littered in moon symbolism, from the actual symbols we see, to the name of almost every Wano clan, which is evidence Oda intended this. I have a short video on TLA about how I think Blackbeard's going to get Pluton, and that's interesting because he is very tied to the moon. Like in that panel where he's crying as a kid, the first ever one, similar to one that looks like Usopp, there's the full moon in the above him in the background. So that isn't all though. There's many ties to Blackbeard and the moon, so it's interesting. Residents of Ohara were renowned for their knowledge of history, with Clover actually knowing the name of the ancient kingdom. Inside the library of the Ohara was the famous orrery, which showed us a load of celestial bodies orbiting the One Piece world. But as we know, only one moon can be seen in the sky. This creates the mystery of what happened to the other moons. It might be that just as the world government destroyed islands, etc., causing people to flee and seek refuge elsewhere, they did the same for the moons. Potentially, the moons were used as a power source for Pluton, leading to their destruction, which is what results in us having multiple tribes on one moon, as depicted by the murals. This would explain why we only see one moon, which would indicate Pluton was hidden in Wano before the last moon could be destroyed. Laugh-Tale is intrinsically linked to the moon and its inhabitants, and could even represent a balance between the moon and the sun, but you can hear more on that in my Laugh-Tale moon video. It does provide a ton of evidence though, so here's a super brief recap. Minks are connected to the moon, Zunisha is connected to the moon, Samurai are connected to the moon, Electricity is connected to the moon, Enel is connected to the moon, all of which is connected to Jaya and Joy Boy, which I personally believe to be both a part of Laugh-Tale. If what I'm saying is correct, I think it's likely that after all but one of the moons were destroyed, the rest of the moon population and refugees migrated to Laugh-Tale. Anyway, back to the formation of the world. As Pluton is repeatedly used on the New World to cleanse the seas and suppress uprising factions, the world suffers from more great earthquakes, but this time triggering underwater volcanoes to erupt, particularly around the equator. Over the years, the mixing of magma turns what's left of the supercontinent and newly formed islands into the Red Line, up until Pluton is hidden in Wano to prevent any further destruction. The offering of Pluton's Joy Boy is Lily's betrayal, in my opinion, and resulted in him using dance powder to take all the water in Alabasta and dumping it inside a walled-off Wano. But I cover that in the Emu Lily video. Anyway, to conclude, so the One Piece world continues to evolve, just like our own planet. The shifting tectonic plates and unpredictable forces of nature shape the very fabric of this fantastical world, creating a rich tapestry of adventure and mystery and discovery. I think it's possible that we will see another reformation of the world, whether or not that's the Red Line being made back into the continent of Pangaea, or more likely just broken up completely and the world will be covered in one sea, which will be the all blue. But I'm still umming and ahhing about the actual future of the Red Line. So yeah, I'll include that in another video. Okay, so in the video that follows this, it's where I explain how I believe Jaya was originally located over Reverse Mountain. I also explain Jaya's creation, the creation of other islands that came from Jaya, like Zo in my opinion, how all this ties to the moon, and why Laugh-Tale went from being in its original position to being displaced and potentially fired up into the sky as well. I didn't go into the details of Emu's involvement either, or the formation of the world government. However, that's all explained in the Hero of Atreya video, but I personally think it's a must watch because it's going to be revealed within the next 50 chapters, I think. I'll finish off this mini-series as well with the last half of Joy Boy's journey from Ohara to Dawn Island and back again. So check out the video on the first half of his journey if you need to catch up. We have features from Dak Sake, Brago, Randy Troy, Parvision, others coming, so sub to stay tuned. If you've made it this far, you've just won Celestial Dragon status. Let me know what your first act would be as a Celestial in the comments. Until next time, fellow adventurers, may your hearts be filled with the spirits of the sea. May your dreams guide you to the greatest treasure of all, the One Piece. And peace. Peace.